House to Home, presented by Remax Diamond Realty.
Okay, everybody, this is going to admittedly be a fast episode of House to Home because Gina is in the warm comforts of her office. I'm here in Harmon. Our wonderful friend Liz is in Denver, Colorado. Hey, you know what? Mile High City. You guys lost Russell Wilson this week, but you gained Liz Duenas. So, Liz, and I know you're not feeling well, a tad under the weather, and I'm sure the altitude pressure doesn't help and everything. But talking about real estate hopefully will brighten your spirits and make you feel a little bit better.
Of course.
All right. So we are talking, ladies, we're continuing the wonderful dialogue that we've been having. Now we're talking about working with your sellers. Gina, where are we as far as being in the life cycle? Because it is really like a relationship and it's not just, a simple business transaction. This is very, very unique.
Oh, yeah. In order to help our buyers, we need to first help the sellers get to the point where they want to sell, put it on the market. We need to create the inventory. So absolutely. Working with the sellers is one of the more important tasks that we have. And we always start when people call me and they want to put their, they always say, how's the market? I think for real estate, the market's always great. You just have to identify what is affecting the market at that particular time. But I always start with talking to the sellers about their title and their ownership, because I want the history on that in order for me to know how we're going to move forward. I ask for all the pertinent documents. Your map is important. If you have an old appraisal report, I'd really like to see that, because the relevant information's in there. It'll tell me what the flood zone is. It'll tell me what the zoning is. It'll tell me how, the year built. And I could certainly ask all that from the sellers, but I do find there are occasions when the seller doesn't have that information available. And so in cases like that, so that's my checklist. I need a copy of your ownership. If you have title and one of the people that was previously on the title isn't there anymore, I want to know what that situation looks like so we can make sure there wasn't anything missed. I want a copy of the map. I want a copy of the floor plan. When I could get that from an old appraisal. A lot of people don't have access to old appraisal. So if they don't have access to old appraisal, then I can make arrangements to measure the house either by someone in our office, or I will get an appraiser to do it for me. And when I have them come to do that, all they're doing is measuring so that I know my numbers are accurate. They don't do the valuation, but the inspection is to give me the ability to do the valuation.
Okay. Do you have to have, Liz, if you're a seller, like maybe not even a completely exhaustively detailed history, but at least, like a running log about, who has lived here in the past? If the house is if the property is a little bit older, what kinds of tenants there have been over the years, like the style of construction it had, the specific contractor, things like that.
Well, I think for Gina and I, our main concern is ownership of the documentation, and that's why a preliminary title research is important, and to see whether there are any liens on that property, because sometimes property owners were either deeded it from family members, and just the other day, someone was telling me that the property was their name, their husband had passed. And then I said, well, show me a copy of your title research. And when they went back to the research, they found out there were other family members on that deed. So it's really critical, because we cannot do anything unless we have all the proper owners recorded on that document. So that's the first step, is to just make sure that they are the legal entity to sign our documentation. And then the other thing is to make sure there are no liens on the property, or there are no mortgages, or someone may have come and claimed part of that property and the owner is unaware. So Gina and I would always review that documentation carefully to make sure there are no issues. The worst thing and it happened to one transaction I was doing, where we were selling, in the midst of selling the property, and they showed a 60,000 tax lien, which almost put a stop to the transaction. Luckily, the owner had the receipts, and they even forgot that they settled that. But luckily they had the receipts. Can you imagine dealing with the government of Guam if you don't have your receipts, and the proof, the burden of the proof falls with you, and it's a $60,000 lien? It messes everything up. It halts anything we can do with that transaction unless that lien is satisfied. So again, that is why Gina and I are very careful that when we list property, we want to see all the appropriate documentation, the maps. And when she mentioned a copy of an old appraisal, that kind of helps in determining the size of the home. For example, if it's a 4-bedroom and an appraiser already did the measurements and there were no new changes to the layout or the construction of the home, then we would utilize that measurement, or we would remeasure the home as well. Because when we do our market analysis, the value could be based on the size of the home, the number of bedrooms, the bathrooms. So these are items, and of course, we'll talk about that a bit more in our next step about the inspections we do. But in the initial collection of data, these are things we need on the front side.
Gina, you mentioned a few moments ago that there are sometimes some discrepancies that, like are left out, certain amounts of information that they may not have, documentation that doesn't, that isn't in their possession, what have you. What is the most common bit of information that is key that tends to be a discrepancy?
That creeps up for us is, a lot of owners, especially here where we do add-ons to our properties, when we go do the inspection, that's one of the critical points that we're looking at. If the boundary is easily identifiable, so we can tell, okay, these are your areas, or the boundary markers were already there, or perhaps a fence is already in place. So I've got a home in Santa Rita. And when I initially, Santa Rita, the lots are cut up smaller than, it's a subdivision. So the lots are smaller. So when I went there and I looked at the house, I already suspected there was going to be an issue, because I can see that the house that I was inspecting in relationship to the house next door, I could tell that typically you're going to need 16 feet between those two houses. And I can see that there was not 16. I don't mean see, I mean, I was guessing there's not 16 feet there. And so that's one of the first things that I asked, the sellers. I don't believe you are meeting setback. And of course, they're like, no, when this house is built, this is how it was built when we got our permit. And that's the thing. People believe that when you get a building permit to construct your home, that the government is somehow saying everything, okay, here's the permit, everything is good to go, including where you're positioning the house in relationship to the required setback in the law. They're not saying that. They're just saying the plans you gave us, well, it meets the building code, and yeah, go ahead and build on your land. But the responsibility to make sure you're building in the right spot, on the right land, that is your responsibility. And I say that because I actually had an owner who was going to build, and he was building on the wrong property. I went there just, he just wanted me to look at his property. So I just God has a way of working everything out. Anyway, I went there. He said, Gina, come and look, because I want you to see where we're going to build. I drove there and I didn't know where his property was. So in order for me to find his property, because he said he'll meet me, I actually had gone, we have our ways of finding property, and I had gotten the sketch. So I followed my sketch. So I was parked in front of the property. He calls me. He's like, hey, I've been waiting for 10 minutes and you're rather late. So I think I'm just going to go. We'll do this later. And I said, I'm in front of your lot. And he says, no, I'm in front of my lot. You don't know where my lot is. So I said, listen, I'm in front of your lot. So I drove to where he was and I showed him the map that I had. And I said, wait, this is your lot number. I was in front of your lot. And he's like, no, I already had this property cleared. And he got a survey, Jason, and he was building 2 lots away from the lot that he had title to.
And this is why you always check.
He didn't start building yet. He actually didn't start building yet. So like I said, God has a way of fixing things, and
there you
he
go.
must
Let's end on that, because that's just perfect.
Those are the things we do.
Hey, but that happens with contractors,
It
Jason.
happens.
With Gina and I, that we had one contractor that built like 4 houses, and the one house she built in
Yeah.
encroached on a boundary and the
Yes.
house was already built. So
Yeah.
we had to resolve that issue. Otherwise, we could not sell that home. So there are many factors that Gina and I have to look at to make sure if we're selling your home, that it complies with all the regulations. Otherwise, there'll be glitches and we can't move forward with the
And
transaction.
number one priority, is it actually in fact your home?
Yeah, yes,
Yes,
Oh my
definitely.
God.
exactly.
And this is when I'm sure your phones go ringing off the hook. So, ladies, we appreciate it. Liz, feel better, and there's lots of good places to eat out there in Denver. So,
Thanks, James.
pack up some snow and bring it back to us because we need it because it's real hot
Yes.
back here.
Yeah, they had
It's
a
hot.
big dump of snow. Unfortunately, we're not going skiing, so
Okay, so Gina, if I see you around Marine Drive and everything, we'll go get some sunscreen together because man, I need it.
I'm telling you, it is hot.
All right, take care, ladies.
bye.
Bye bye.
House to Home, presented by RE/MAX Diamond Realty.